Hi, I'm Dr. Philip Ovadia, your guide to understanding the relationship between red meat and metabolic health. Today, I'm going to break it down because most people are caught in the crossfire of conflicting information around red meat and metabolic health. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to debunk some of the common myths about red meat and cholesterol. We're going to talk about the real impact of red meat on heart health and metabolic diseases. And finally, we're going to talk about how to choose the right kind of red meat for optimal health. Let's jump right in and talk about some of the common myths about red meat and cholesterol. First, we need to understand that cholesterol isn't the enemy and how it's been misrepresented in the dietary guidelines. Cholesterol is a substance that is vital for life. We literally would not exist without cholesterol. It makes up our cell walls and it serves many important purposes in our body, like being the precursor to many of the essential hormones in our body and playing a part in our immune system. The diet heart hypothesis was first put forth in the 1950s, and it theorized that the more cholesterol that we ate, the higher our blood cholesterol levels would be, and that then those increased blood cholesterol levels were what was leading to the development of heart disease. And it turns out that we now have plenty of information to show that both parts of the diet heart hypothesis are incorrect. The vast majority of the cholesterol in our body is synthesized by our body in the liver. It does not come from the dietary cholesterol that we eat. And because of this, limitations on dietary cholesterol have actually been removed from the dietary guidelines. But that wasn't very publicly promoted because of all the years that they had been telling people to avoid dietary cholesterol. And then many of the studies that purported to show a relationship between saturated fat and cholesterol intake and the outcomes of heart disease turned out to be poor epidemiologic studies that could not show true causation. They could only show correlation between these things. And this is a very important concept to understand. As a simple example, I like to explain to people that if you did a study on rainy days, you would see that there are lots of people using umbrellas. And if you didn't know better, you might think that somehow the umbrella was causing the rain. We of course know this not to be true, but that is similar to the way that a lot of the early science around saturated fat, cholesterol, and heart disease was done. And yes, there may be some correlations there, but it turns out that there is not causation. So let's talk about the real impact of red meat on heart disease and metabolic diseases. There have now been extensive scientific studies that show that there is no causative effect between eating red meat and the development of heart disease. There was a large review of the scientific evidence that was published a few years ago in the Annals of Internal Medicine that showed that there was no significant linkage between the consumption of red meat and the development of cardiovascular disease, or for that matter, cancer, another common misconception that you may hear. It turns out that a diet that is low in carbohydrates but high in protein, including red meat, can actually help to reverse many of the underlying metabolic disorders that increase the risk of heart disease. The key ones are insulin resistance and diabetes. And we now know that a high protein diet, which includes plenty of red meat, is a very effective way to improve insulin resistance and can actually reverse type 2 diabetes. Now, it is important to understand the difference between processed and unprocessed red meat in dietary studies. Processed red meats are things like hot dogs and sausages, for instance, that may have a lot of other added ingredients like sugar. And many of the studies that are purported to show a relationship between red meat and things like cardiovascular disease and cancer are looking at people consuming large amounts of processed red meat. Now, when you look at something like processed red meat that also includes a lot of sugar and other chemicals, how can one reliably say that it was the red meat itself and not the sugar and other chemicals in that food that was causing the outcomes that we see. And furthermore, when you look at the epidemiologic studies that are most often used to purport a benefit, a relationship between red meat and negative outcomes, the people that are eating red meat in those studies are largely consuming them with other processed foods. Here in the US, when someone says they eat a hamburger, it usually means red meat plus the toppings, plus the bun, plus the french fries, and the soda that they drank with it. And yet these researchers want to blame the red meat itself instead of looking at all the other components of that meal. So, how can you choose the right kind of red meat for optimal health? Well, first and foremost, you want to avoid the processed meat with added sugars and other unhealthy fillers. You want to focus on eating whole, real animal protein, like steaks, ground beef, and even organ meats, which themselves have unique nutritional additional benefits. And finally, as best as you can, you want to find quality sources of your red meat. This can include connecting with local ranchers who can be a great source of high quality meat at lower prices, because you've cut out all the middlemen between the rancher and the supermarket when you go directly to the rancher. And have a conversation with them, understand how they were taking care of the cows, because that will give you a deeper appreciation of that red meat that you're consuming. So, I hope you found this helpful, and I hope this clarified the relationship between red meat and good metabolic health. If you need more information or you have other questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. We want to hear your feedback about what topics you want to hear from us, and I'm here to learn from you. So go visit ifixhearts.com to get all of the information and resources that we have available to support your optimal metabolic health.